Guys, Collin Moshman here, and we're going to be floor tabling the $2 buy-in games on Full Tilt. And we had a number of guys on the forum who wanted to see me playing more of the micro stakes, or the few tables up, and I'm more than happy to accommodate any requests that you guys have, anything you want to see. And the first thing that we'll notice is that I'm staggering my tables. And like I said, I always do this when I multi-table, and I like to have half in high blinds and half in low blinds, because that way I'm playing the same number of tables, but I can concentrate my efforts more in the more important decisions of the high blinds up top, and during the low blinds, since you're folding a lot, there's a little less to worry about. Now the biggest adjustment I'm making for low stakes games is I'm playing a lot more of a value based game, and I'm not gonna be raising a lot, hoping to knock guys out. And pretty much when I think I have the best hand, I'm going to be betting it very aggressively. And in the low blinds, I'm going to be playing hands like pocket pairs very aggressively, or limping in to see them a lot because of the excellent implied odds. Okay, I'm often be able to stack an opponent if I hit a set, or if I hit a straight, a flush. Here I'm going to fold my suited king-queen under the gun. I would probably play that from early middle position, but not from any of the early position seats. And in the upper right table, the hand that I doubled on early was I had the opponent in the cutoff raised to 90 during blinds of 15-30, and both the button and the small blind called, and with a pot of 300, I simply raised all in with pocket tens, because there's already 300 out there, and I thought my hand was best. And at these stakes, I thought it was quite possible that I would get called by a lower pocket pair, and possibly gamble against two overcards. And sure enough, the cutoff folded and the button called with a suited 9 king, which is much too loose a call, but that's the type of opposition you're going to be up against a lot in the lower stakes, so you don't want to be making bluffs or whatever and get pissed off when guys call, because you should expect them to call, at least during low blinds when you're not putting their tournament life on the line and it's a relatively small decision for them. Okay, I'm not going to bluff this guy in the upper left, even though my hand is just about no showdown value. In the bottom right, I flopped a straight, and I'm going to absolutely lead right out and bet. And the pot's 120. I'm going to bet close to the pot. And there's no reason not to bet, okay? If I don't bet, all I'm going to do is get myself a smaller pot. Now the pot's 640. This guy has 1100 left. You could call, but I'm just going to shove all in and not delay an almost inevitable all in. And he calls the bottom set, so he is redrawing to a full house of the board pairs. And fortunately it doesn't. Awesome. So that worked out good. I'm going to complete getting 5-1 in the upper left with Jack Queen and play hit to win. And I've hit, so I'm going to go ahead and bet right out. I'm going to bet about 2/3 of the pot. I'll check my 3-4 suit in the upper right. And my bet in the upper left takes it immediately, which is a fine result. And against 3 opponents, I wouldn't bluff this at any stakes. Okay, very rarely are you looking to bluff a whole bunch of guys, and certainly not at a $2 buy-in. And I don't mean to be dismissive of the $2 buy-ins. Here I'm going to limp this, which I wouldn't do at a higher stakes, because they're very good training ground, and you can have guys playing recreationally, and that's totally legit, because it's a lot of fun. You know, this is a very fun game, and people who want to play either recreationally or to build their skills, then that's excellent. So take advantage of the enormous offering of online and have some fun, improve your skills. Here I'm just checking my twos. I'm playing, again, hit to win, so I don't have my set. No set, no bet, as the cheesy expression goes. So I'll just check fold, even though, okay, I'm playing the board here. I mean, I'm playing queen, queen, 8, 8, 9. But again, no way am I going to bluff. Here I'm getting excellent odds, but 3 jack has no post-flop potential. I'll just lay it down. Slightly surprised, nobody, there are 2 guys with a 9 in that hand, and nobody bet the 9. So maybe a few of these guys are a little more cautious. One thing also, I've noticed that Camtasia, the recording software we use, often doesn't pick up my Poker Office overlay, but I do have stats going on all these tables, and anytime that I use one of them in my decision making, I'll explicitly point out what that is. But I have VPIP, which is how often the guys enter the pot, and is a measure of looseness or tightness, as well as the pre-flop raise percentage and a post-flop aggression. So guys who are very loose passive will be a lot more inclined to go over top of. Guys who are tight and raising early will give a lot more credit to, and will certainly explain anytime that comes into play. Upper left table, blinds are 100, 200, and I've got under 2,000. This guy has a 38 VPIP, which is pretty high. He's most likely a high blind limper. And I'll check. And I flopped a open-ended straight draw. I'm going to check raise him here because my hand has a lot of value. If he bets, I'm going to raise. And otherwise, we get a free card. The only time I wouldn't raise is if he made a bet that was pot committing and I couldn't come over top of. Okay, I've hit my straight and I'm just going to come right out betting. I'll bet 300. And hopefully he'll stick around. He does. And in this, he has a 7-8. I'm looking good. And I want to make a strong bet for value. Okay, I'm going to be making a bet that puts me all in. Maybe close to all in. I'm going to come out and bet 750 here. Just kind of a random large number. And one thing is that when you have a strong hand, you need to get value for it. And a lot of times people complain, he calls, okay, I'm sure I've got him here. And people complain, I can't bluff these guys. And that's true, you may not be able to bluff them, but what does that mean? It means you can, and he had a 10 king, is what being displayed here. And if you can't bluff a guy, that necessarily means you can value bet him. Okay, because guys that can't be bluffed just means, I'll be friendly. Always be nice to the fish guys. they're the ones making you your money, so always be nice to them. Okay, here I flop top pair against 3 other guys. I'm going to come out and lead out. And if that doesn't take it, then I'll most likely just bail on that hand. And here, because I think the big blind might just go all in, I'm not going to call. So hopefully this bet will take it immediately. And it does. Nice. Anyway, when you do have a big hand, you should just bet it very aggressively for value. And you want to play a big pot when you have a big hand. That's a classic Ed Miller no limit hold'em theory and practice, the pot size philosophy. When you have a big hand, make big bets so you can win big pots. And it sounds kind of straightforward, but a lot of people seem to get the concept kind of confused and bluff big, make small value bets, particularly in a low stakes game, even a high stakes game actually. When you bet for value with a strong hand, you want to make big bets. Now in both the top tables, the blinds are getting quite high, although we still have over 10 blinds worth of chips. KW Wolfie is a potential HBL, and I'm going to mark that Mr. Pens or whatever is an HBL, a high blind limper, because he limped from early position with the weak hand of King 10 offsuit. And these are guys you really want to play against. And hopefully we'll get to see what KW Wolfie has. And because if it shows down, that means we get to see his hand, which is just what we want. Chat is kind of important in these games. Not like really important, but again, if guys are really weak, no matter if they draw out on you, whatever, you should tend to compliment them. Okay, you want them to come back, you want them to play, both because, we're nice guys, right? But also, these are really the people who are giving you your money. So resist the urge when you're drawn out on to berate them, because it's bad etiquette, and it's against your purpose of having weak competition that sticks around. Under the gun, who has a comparatively tight VPIP of 18.2 min raises, and because it's six-handed, I'm going to come over top here, because I think ace-queen figures to be ahead of his range, and smooth calling is kind of weak. If he calls this bet, I'm going to continuation bet any flop. So I'm going to come out, and I'm going to bet a bit over half the pot, hoping to take it immediately. And if he calls or re-raises, I'm going to leave this hand if I don't improve. In the bottom left, I'm going to fold ace-10 from early position. I would need to be in mid-late position to play it. Perhaps the cutoff, I would play ace-10, but I'm certainly not going to play it from early position. And a weak ace on the button is pretty tough to play and get much value from during low blinds. Except if you retrospectively know you'll flop trips. But don't play results-oriented poker. And meanwhile, I've been babbling and timed out on the upper left corner, so it goes to show if you're recording yourself, don't get too obsessed with the sound of your own voice. Okay, Mr. Pins his pocket eights, hold up, against a flush and gut shot straight draw. And in the upper right hand table, our ace-7 is looking fairly good in a blind versus blind confrontation, but we get a walk, which means the small blind just folds. And I will fold the 9-4 off, regardless of the action, so I'll just click it now. I'll certainly raise ace-queen suited, and I'll come in for a raise of around 2.5 blinds. Probably forced to call a re-raise because of the strength of my hand. Uh, 8-9 I would often raise against tight blinds, but I'm certainly not going to come in with a limper and loose blinds. And when I say loose, both of these guys, both of the blinds after 45 hands have a VPIP of exactly 31.3, 31.1, and that's pretty loose. Okay, so VPIP means the person is voluntarily paying to enter the pot of anything over 25 is pretty loose. 30 and above is quite loose. Okay, ace-10 offsuit is a very strong hand. Here we have a min raise. I'm just going to come over top and shove. The pot's over 1,000. I've got good fold equity, and I'm up against a much stronger hand, but I think that was a pretty strong play against an aggressive player who makes a pretty, would generally be a steer raise from the button. And I stuck out on him. And like I said, if there's one thing that I love, it's sucking out on players in really low stakes games. It's just this thing I have where it's like, yeah. Okay, here I'm getting the pot's 700, it cost me 150 to call, so I will, because that closes the action, even though 3/8's a very weak hand. You could fold that without it being too big a mistake. And the button makes the decision very easy with this top pair. But in that situation, it's often going to be check down, and you get a free chance to hit. So only because I was getting about 7-1 did I call that. With any type of normal odds, you're getting like 3-1, even 5-1. You should just lay that down. The blinds move up to 200, 400, and if these guys, I'm almost certainly going to be playing this hand. Here I've backdoored into a straight, and I'm going to come out with a huge bet because there's no possible flush. I shouldn't say huge, but I'll just bet the pot. And I'm going to go all in here. It's going to be very tough for either of these guys to call because this is the bubble, and I'm putting them all into their tournament life. So I would do this pretty wide, and King Jack suited more than qualifies for that. I'd be surprised if KW Wolfie called. He's also high blind limp before, so we're taking advantage of that tendency. Okay, I'm going to complete with a 5-7 because we're about 30 blinds deep. And I know I said not to bluff, but this is kind of a c-bet since I just completed before the flop. And if he calls or re-raises, the pot's his. But often when I complete and my hand has 0 showdown value, I'll give it 1 chance at the flop. Bottom left, we have a pot of 275, but we have a very tight guy raising under the gun. Meanwhile, I'm going to make a raise in the bottom right, and I'm going to call this bet on the button with ace-jack suited and see what the flop brings. Hope I can play these guys after the flop. And I hit a 5 on the river to take that pot. Pretty lucky. Our opponent had pocket deuces, and he should have raised that before the flop. After we limped and he had a pocket pair and a big stack, he should have come with a raise. And the 300 raise in the bottom right won immediately. So I thought, it's five-handed play, and our opponent has been playing kind of loose passive. So most likely you're just going to isolate him in that position, in that spot. But sometimes you do win immediately, which is always very nice. Obviously. So, here the pot's 560, it cost me 310 to call. I will call getting any better than... Okay, I'm going to shove the upper left, because none of these guys can call for the reasons I outlined earlier. And if I were getting 2-1 or better, I'd call this just under 2-1. I'm going to fold. I'd be very surprised if I were called in the upper left. Again, this guy's 100 chips, right? So you can risk your tournament life with... when another opponent is just about to leave. And I'm going to come all in again here, because I think the vast majority of the time, this guy's going to fold and I'm going to take his 500. And the side pot vastly exceeds the main pot. So he calls and I get called out that time. But we're not playing, we're not the ones risking bubbling out. So, to me that's a pretty acceptable risk. And hey, we rivered him, so once again, I draw out, 5 blinds, I'm going to push any king. And I'll fold, okay, this is kind of a tough decision, the upper right, because we're on the bubble there. And he might well fold. I'm going to shove the bottom left with my ace-queen. I'm going to give it to him, because he's almost as short stacked as the shorter stack guy. Pocket aces, I don't mind action, so I'll raise to 280. And I'm going to shove pretty much any 2 with 5 blind effective stacks. And I'll make a bet that isn't quite all in, but clearly pot commits me, just to kind of vary things a little. And here I'm going to play for stacks, because we're not super deep, and I've got an overpair. And it wins, which is nice. I'll shove again. Suited 2 jack for 4 blinds. Definite shove. And he's got us nominated, but we certainly have outs. And he takes it, which is okay. I'm still going to raise very wide with 10 blind effective stacks. He limps. I'm going to put them all in here. And maybe he was trapping, maybe he just wants to play. Yeah, so he managed to trap us, but we're only a 2-1 dog, and bang, we hit the queen. Guys, I can't even tell you how much I'm loving this. Okay, with under 10 blinds, I'm going to show my ace-queen. You finished the tournament in first place. $9 would be credited to your account. I have never seen that message. I love that. Okay. So I get to make a fun, super fun video, and win $9. Does life get any sweeter than that? Well, hopefully. um, this guy leads out for 360, and I'm gonna raise him with top pair. It's kind of an unexpected lead out, and I'm gonna hope for the best with a pretty strong hand. And if he puts me all in, I think I'm gonna be pocket him into a call. So at this point, the pot's 2160. He's got 915 left, and we're definitely playing it all in. So it's not an ideal situation, but I absolutely have to call this, getting about 3.5 to 1. And we indeed were ahead at the flop, but he turned, made trips in the turn. Such is life. If it's folded to me, I'm going to shove my 9-7 with... Am I going to shove my 9-7? This is pretty close. I'm not going to shove. Okay. I would shove if the blinds were a little bit higher, but that was a bit too marginal, particularly with a very big stack and a very loose player. If it's folded to me, I will shove, though, the king 10 with about 9 blinds on the button. And these are decisions that you really get good at with ICM-based software like Syningo Wizard, because they'll convert these chip decisions into math decisions if you assign calling ranges. So here, for instance, I would assign a calling range of this guy to pretty much any pocket pair or ace-5 or 2-eye Broadway cards. And the big blind, who's risking elimination, I would make a bit tighter and say it's probably calling with mid-high pocket pairs and maybe ace-7 or above or something. But again, if you input that into ICM-based software, and again, ICM is the mathematical procedure to give chip decisions into money decisions. So, for instance, there I would have said that if I fold, maybe I have an equity of around $1.75, and if I shove, maybe that raises my equity, is a plus equity of around 15 cents. And always think about things in terms of dollars whenever you can. I'm going to check this because I think even if the button folds, there's too big a chance the small blind with this huge stack will call. But thinking in terms of money is really a powerful weapon, and you can do like a couple programs. Syningo Power Tools was the pioneer. A Wizard, I much prefer the interface, and is the program I use. But here I'm going to come in for a raise. This is kind of borderline, but you have to be pretty aggressive on your button. I wouldn't raise any worse than this, and even this is kind of borderline. And Mrs. Gok is punishing us for it, which he should do with a pretty wide range of hands if he's a good player. So, and he has a VPIP of nearly 50, which is hyper loose. So I'm not going to go over top with a junk hand hoping he folds. And with effective stacks of around 11 blinds, I'm going to try to limp here because my hand is fairly strong, but I don't think I'm showing a profit pushing. And I play pretty much playing hit to win. Now that he's checked behind the flop, I'm going to throw out a bet. And even if he calls, there's a chance my king high will show down and be good. And so we'll hope that the king high is good. If he bets, it's his. Bang! So he's got 3 check. I love it when I say something like that, and it turns out to be true. Like, yeah, I knew my king high would be good there. How could it not be? Okay, in the upper table, we want to avoid situations where we're fighting for not to be the bubble boy, because even when you do win that fight, you usually take at best third place once you make it into the money. I'll call again here because I don't think I'm showing a profit by shoving, or not much of one, but this hand has pretty good showdown value. Now it says, so I'm going to be looking to make a play at this table and not just, so this is a plus equity shove in the bottom right with 11 blinds and a mid-suited ace. And particularly now when we've got a stack of around 5 blinds, I really need to make a play. And he limps, so I'm just going to shove. And I would do that with a lot wider than just Jack 9, because a lot of times guys are just going to limp and then fold. And that's really valuable there when we win the 320 without a fight. Okay, with 11 blinds I can't shove, and any other raise is kind of awkward with 11 blind effective stacks. Here again, I don't think I was going to get this guy to fold. So, this is kind of an odd play. We have Mrs. Gok limping, which I'd be happy to go over top of, and a min raise. And I'm trying to decide whether to call the min raise or re-raise. Maybe I'm giving this guy too much credit. I'm just going to call because I find that to be such an unusual play. And he's a pretty passive player as well, with a pre-flop raise percentage of 6%. I'm going to shove my ace-9 with well under 10 blinds. And we were going in dominated, but that's okay. It was certainly the right play. And we probably should have shoved the 7s before the flop, since it's looking like our rightmost opponent did not have much. Either that or he just totally missed the flop. Okay, pardon me there. 3-6. I'm going to fold that, particularly with an extremely short stack still present. And 9-5. So I'm looking to shove pretty wide, but I'm not just going to shove junk on the button with a pretty decent stack. And a much shorter stacked opponent, with the guy in between being hyper loose, with a VPIP now of over 50%. Okay, with about 5 blinds, I'm just going to shove this. And like I said, I really don't like to be in situations where I'm with one other opponent and we're just trying to progress up the ladder to money, because you end up just getting blinded out too quick even when you do move up one chain of the ladder. And 7 King suited is strong enough to push there. And if he goes all in, I think we're going to be getting the odds to make an any 2 cards call. So he just calls. I'm pretty sure he would call a raise. I'm going to check and hope that he checks the flop and I can put them all in, which I'd certainly do on a raggedy board like this. So he's effectively gone all in here for 410. I'm basically getting about 2 to 1 on this call with a 10 high, because there's no way he's going to fold. And it's close. I would call with probably a queen high. Would be the weakest hand I would call that bet with. I'm not going to call with a 10 high. Okay, I'm going to shove a king. And 10-7 I'm going to let go. Okay, Mrs. Gok puts Papa Baby all in. They coin flip, and Mrs. Gok has Papa Baby drawing dead. So we move on to heads up. And with effective stacks of under 10 blinds, we're going to be looking to play shove fold poker. He min raises us, and I could either re-raise all in now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to stop and go, because I think he would call a re-raise. I'm just going to call this bet, and I'm going to go all in regardless of the flop. And now that we have a flush draw as well, that's making this a particularly appealing situation. So I certainly call that. I'm going to complete with a 7 queen against this fairly tight opponent. Okay, he had kings and was making a little suck bet. It works for him. But we at least take second. Not so bad. Chalk me up another $5.40. I'm on a roll. Hell yeah! I have a lot of fun making these videos, if you guys couldn't tell. So, now we just have one table left, and I'll giant size them. As kind of a corollary to our chat earlier, our chat about player chat, one thing that you can try to do, which isn't necessarily the nicest, but if you're playing against a guy who clearly knows what he's doing, and he's a regular, and you're playing him a lot, and this occurs more often at the higher stakes, feel free to criticize a good play that he makes. So for instance, if he makes a call with a junk hand when he's correct to call because he's getting excellent pot odds, maybe somebody makes a desperation shove and he's getting 3-1 odds and he calls with 2-6 and he doesn't draw out, then feel free to just throw in a comment suggesting that this was a dumb play. Because that's very legit to antagonize the good players a little, and usually you won't get too far with that. But sometimes if you can put them on a little tilt, then that's pretty cool, and that's all par for the game. The thing you do not want to do again is insult the fish. You have a min raise by our leftmost opponent and a call. Very rarely do you want to min raise. The only times I'll really min raise are when I really want action. I think somebody will come over top, or maybe in a mix of my play, but very rarely is it correct because you're offering guys such good odds to call. And even if you throw in just a tiny bit more, for instance, instead of 200, if you just make it 225, a lot of times you're going to get extra folds from guys who feel like they don't have to defend their blind. A min raise, a lot of times an opponent will find it maybe just annoying and feel like you're challenging them, but if you throw in just a little bit extra, then they have to do a little more to calculate pot odds, if they're even doing that, and it appears like you're maybe representing a little more strength. So I'm going to come over top of this guy and hope for the best. So we're going to flip a coin with 2 overcards versus his 2s, and he should have just shoved before the flop, but it works out for him. And I think overall that was a pretty fun session, and we definitely had a lot of ideas on how to beat the low stakes game. So I'll be fielding any questions you guys have about this on the forums, and I hope everyone enjoyed. Collin Moshman signing off.